everyone. So you know how some people plan their whole lives around their horoscopes and others, well, let's just say they don't.
Right.
Well, today we're going deep, 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 diving into all things Virgo.
Deep dive. I like it.
And I think even if you're a total astrology skeptic, you're going to find this interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
Because really, it's less about the stars and more about, how we see patterns in people, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like getting a little window into a different way of thinking, even if you don't necessarily believe your destiny is written in the stars.
Exactly. And to prove it, get this, Freddie Mercury, a Virgo.
Oh, wow.
Beyonce. Also a Virgo. That's from Zodiac Fusion, by the way, which you sent over, which is going to be our guide today.
Excellent source.
So clearly, we're talking about a super diverse group here, right? But what connects them? Well, according to the text, we've got classic Virgo traits. Analytical, practical, detail-oriented.
All those classic Virgo tendencies.
Right, like, all the works.
Absolutely. Those themes definitely come up a lot when you look at descriptions of Virgos. But it's more helpful, I think, to think of these traits less like labels and more like a spectrum.
Oh, a spectrum. Okay.
Right. So, for example, someone might express that detail-oriented nature of a Virgo by, creating these intricate spreadsheets at work. While someone else might express it by, meticulously organizing their spice rack.
Okay.
Same core trait, totally different expressions.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not about, being a stereotype. It's more nuanced than that. But that meticulousness thing, that's actually a perfect example of how those Virgo tendencies, let's call them, can be super valuable in the real world.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Isn't there that saying, the devil's in the details?
There is.
Yeah.
And honestly, in so many fields, that meticulousness,
Yeah.
that ability to zero in on those tiny details, that's not just being picky. That is a superpower.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
imagine you're an engineer designing a bridge.
Okay.
Or you're a financial analyst. You're combing through these companies' giant financial reports.
Yeah, yeah.
That Virgo attention to detail could be the difference between massive success and a total catastrophe.
Oh, wow. When you put it like that, it's kind of a big deal.
It really is.
It reminds me of that bit in the text how it said Virgos dislike chaos. And I'm like, it's not just about being tidy. It's about needing order to really thrive in whatever it is that they're doing.
It's a fundamental need for structure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean every Virgo needs a perfectly organized desk.
Right, right.
But it does mean they're probably going to do really well in environments where they can create and maintain order.
Okay, so far. So Virgo, but
Yeah.
then Zodiac Fusion throws us for a loop with these mega famous Virgos.
Right.
Okay, so we've got Freddie Mercury, flamboyant on-stage presence.
Right.
Beyonce, incredible creative drive.
Totally.
It makes you realize there's way more to the sign than, meets the eye at first.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, tons more.
Right.
Take Mother Teresa.
Okay.
Another famous Virgo, right?
Yeah.
When you think Virgo, you don't exactly picture, someone who dedicated their life to compassion and service.
Right.
They're logic and analysis and all that.
Right, right.
But there she is.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Really proves these traits can play out in all kinds of ways.
Totally. It's just because someone has certain tendencies doesn't mean they fit neatly into a box, right?
Exactly.
But speaking of how these Virgo strengths, actually play out, Zodiac Fusion gets into relationships, which I gotta say always piques my interest.
Of course, who doesn't want to know the secret to relationship success?
Right. Exactly. Give me the insider info.
Right. The cheat codes.
Yes. Okay, but before we go full on, Virgos are most compatible with,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask, what are the caveats?
Right. Got to add the nuance.
Yes.
So full disclaimer, relationship compatibility.
Yeah.
Way more than just your sun sign, obviously.
Of course, of
But
course.
These descriptions, they can be kind of insightful if we think of them less as hard and fast rules.
Right.
And more highlighting the values each sign really, prioritizes.
Okay, I like that.
Right. So, for example, the classic Virgo-Sagittarius pairing.
Ooh, the classic clash.
Right. Which the text says can be, quote, challenging.
Challenging.
Now, is that saying it can never work? No, not at all.
Okay.
But it's highlighting that often these two signs just approach life from pretty different angles.
Totally.
Different priority.
So instead of saying Virgos and insert sign here are doomed, it's more like these two signs might need to be extra mindful of each other's, like, needs and how they communicate.
Exactly. Like Virgos often crave stability, predictability.
Okay.
Right? While our Sagittarius friends, they tend to be more spontaneous, adventurous.
Makes sense.
Right. That difference can lead to some, shall we say, friction?
Yeah.
If they're not both, like, aware of it.
Right.
But it can also be amazing.
Oh, okay.
Like, picture this. Virgo's planning a trip, right?
Yeah, I'm picturing it.
They've got backups for their backups. Everything's planned to a T.
Color-coded itinerary.
Exactly. Now, pair that with a Sagittarius who's all about, let's just see where the wind takes us.
Yeah.
And throws in a last-minute detour just for fun.
Ooh, that could go either way.
Right. Could be a recipe for disaster if they're not careful.
Right.
But if our Virgo friend can loosen up a little and our Sagittarius friend can appreciate the value of a good plan, that trip, unforgettable. Blending both their strengths.
I love that. It's not about finding someone who's exactly like you. It's about, like you said, navigating those differences.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's talk more about these Virgo values and relationships then in action.
Okay.
The text mentioned they're big on stability, practicality.
Yes.
What does that actually look like day to day, though? Not just like in theory.
That's the key question, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to throw those words around, but what do they actually mean?
Yes. For Virgo, stability might not be about like the grand romantic gestures, you know.
Okay.
It's more about consistency,
Okay.
reliability.
Knowing that the person they're with, they're going to follow through on what they say.
Right.
That they'll be there when things get tough.
So it's less about being swept off their feet, more about knowing they can depend on their partner.
Exactly. And practicality. Doesn't mean they don't appreciate romance, but they're also going to be thinking about the logistics of life.
Okay, sure.
Planning dates that make sense, budgeting responsibly, having those important conversations instead of just avoiding issues.
Right, right.
It's about approaching love with, like, both the head and the heart.
Which, let's be real, probably a good approach for any relationship, zodiac sign aside.
Oh, absolutely. But for Virgos, that balance is especially important.
Yeah, I get that.
And for anyone who's dating a Virgo, remembering that can make all the difference.
Good to know. Okay, so we've covered a lot. You've shared some really fascinating insights from Zodiac Fusion.
Thank you.
We explored those classic Virgo traits, busted some stereotypes,
Right.
even got a glimpse into how those traits show up in relationships.
It's all connected.
It is all connected.
Yeah.
But before we move on to what our lovely listener can do with all this knowledge,
Okay.
any final thoughts on this whole relationship dynamics thing? You know, it's funny, with all this talk about, like, compatibility and best matches,
Right.
maybe instead of trying to figure out, like, the perfect sign to pair a Virgo with, it's more about, like, really understanding how they approach relationships, you know, on a deeper level.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Because it's like that whole thing with, what are they called? Love languages?
Oh, yeah.
How, like, some people feel most loved when you, like, compliment them, give them words of affirmation and all that.
Right.
While others are all about acts of service or quality time, you know?
Absolutely.
And it's not even just romantic relationships either.
Totally.
Like, imagine figuring out someone's, like, work-style love language.
Oh, interesting.
Right, that could be huge in, like, a professional setting.
Game changer.
Right, so it's less about, like, which sign is best and more like, okay, what makes this person, this Virgo, feel loved, appreciated, understood
Yes.
in this specific context?
Yeah, exactly.
And then how can we, like, you know, adapt our approach to match that?
I love that.
Right. Which, it reminds me of that part in Zodiac Fusion where they talk about how Virgos analyze, like, everything, even love, you know?
Right. They bring that analytical mind.
It's not that they're trying to be difficult or anything. It's more like...
It's just how they're wired. Yeah.
Yeah, like they're wired to think critically, and that applies to, you know, all parts of life, including relationships.
Exactly.
Okay, so basically, if you want to connect with a Virgo on a deeper level, whether it's romantic, professional, whatever,
Okay.
it's not necessarily about, like, those big showy gestures or, you know, making sweeping statements.
Right.
It's more about, like, paying attention to the details.
Yes.
Being reliable, showing them that you appreciate their, like, thoughtful approach to the world, all that.
Because those little things, those are the things that speak volumes to a Virgo.
Yes. Honestly, this has been so eye-opening.
Yes.
We've gone from Freddie Mercury to, like, bridge engineering, and it's all thanks to Virgos.
I love it. I love these conversations.
Right. It's amazing what you can learn when you know, actually dive into these topics.
Totally.
So to our listener, if you've ever been curious about, like, What makes Virgos tick?
Right.
Hopefully this has given you a lot to think about.
Lots to chew on.
But remember, these are just like starting points, right?
Absolutely.
The real magic happens when we actually take the time to get to know the people in our lives, star signs aside.
Beautifully said. Couldn't agree more.
Embrace the complexity, stay curious,
Yes.
and you might be surprised at the connections you make.
100%.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of all things Virgo.
Thank
And until next time, keep those minds open and those deep dives coming.